War Loan Bonds. Part 1. The Currency of Patriotism. The war arrived in America not just with headlines from Pearl Harbor, but with a new arithmetic of survival. In the oak-paneled offices of the Treasury Department, Secretary Henry Morgenthau Jr. faced a problem of staggering scale. The factories needed to churn out bombers, tanks, and ships at an unprecedented rate. That required steel, aluminum, rubber, and labor. But above all, it required money oceans of it. The federal budget for 1940 had been $9.5 billion. The projected cost of the war was over 10 times that every year. Raising taxes alone would cripple the nascent recovery from the Depression and breed resentment. The solution was both financial and psychological. The war bond. Not just an investment, but a sacrament of citizenship, a financial bullet to be fired at the Axis. Thus began the greatest marketing campaign in American history, one that sought not to sell soap, but to sell the war itself. The Eighth War Loan Drive, the Fourth War Loan Drive. These dry fiscal terms were transformed into national pageants. The Treasury didn't just sell bonds, it sold participation, a tangible stake in victory for every man, woman, and child. The bond itself was a physical totem, a 1875 stamp book that, when filled, could be traded for a $25 bond maturing in 10 years. It was designed to be affordable. For 25 cents a week, a schoolchild could own a piece of a P-51 Mustang. For a few dollars a pay period, a riveter at Willow Run could help build the bomber he was working on. In the small town of Seneca Falls, New York, the engine of this campaign was Margaret O'Brien, a 45-year-old widow who taught 8th grade history. To her students, the war had been a distant thunder until a boy in the back row, Jimmy Callahan, lost his older brother on the USS Juneau at Guadalcanal. The abstract became a hollow seat in the Callahan's pew at church. Margaret, her own heart heavy, saw her role with new clarity. She was not just to teach dates and treaties. She was to make the war's financial front comprehensible, to channel grief and anxiety into constructive force. She transformed her classroom into a bond headquarters. A massive map of the world dominated one wall, but instead of capitals, it charted the progress of their Seneca Falls Sentinel Bond Drive. A cardboard battleship, painstakingly cut and painted by the students, inched across a painted Atlantic toward Europe. Every $100 in bonds sold moved it 1 inch. They held competitions between homerooms. They organized a stamp scrap where students brought in tin foil, rubber bands, and newspapers to be recycled, the proceeds going to buy bonds. Margaret recruited the town's butcher, baker, and bank manager to come speak not about their trades, but about the concrete things bonds bought. How many rounds of ammunition 1875 could purchase? How many field rations a $100 bond provided? The pinnacle of her effort was the school assembly for the Fourth War Loan Drive. The gymnasium was decked in red, white, and blue bunting. The guest of honor wasn't a general, but a local hero. Sergeant Frank Russo, home on convalescent leave after losing a leg at Salerno. He sat on the stage in his uniform, his crutches leaning against his chair. Margaret had arranged for the choir to sing "God Bless America," but as they finished, she nodded to Jimmy Callahan. The boy, his face pale but determined, walked to the microphone, a single war bond stamp clutched in his hand. He didn't speak about his brother. He simply said, "This is for my brother Mike, and for Sergeant Russo." He walked to the bond table and pressed the 25-cent stamp into a book. The silence was profound. Then the gymnasium erupted. Children lined up, clutching their quarters and dimes, their small contributions suddenly charged with immense meaning. They weren't buying a bond. They were buying a piece of vengeance, a share of hope, a direct line to their brothers and fathers overseas. Margaret watched, tears in her eyes. She had made the financial engine of the war feel personal, immediate, and moral. In Seneca Falls, victory was measured in inches on a map and stamps in a book. Part 2. The Star-Spangled Sales Force. If Margaret O'Brien was the grassroots field commander of the bond campaign, Its glittering, high-powered generals were in Hollywood. The Treasury Department, in a masterstroke of synergistic propaganda, enlisted the entire Dream Factory as its sales force. Movie stars weren't just spokespeople, they were drafted into a new, unofficial branch of service. Their battlefield was the airwaves, the silver screen, and the stage of massive war bond rallies, and their weapon was their fame. The most iconic of these warrior salesmen was a young actress named Judy Garland. In 1944, at the height of the Seventh War Loan Drive, she stood before a microphone at a rally in Chicago's Soldier Field, a tiny figure against a crowd of over 100,000. She wasn't there to sing "Over the Rainbow." Instead, in a clear, strong voice that belied her nerves, she made a direct, emotional appeal. "Every bond you buy," she told the sea of faces, "is a personal message to our boys. It says, we are behind you. We are building the tools you need. Come home safe." Then she introduced the real headliner. A battered, authentic P-40 Warhawk fighter plane, nicknamed Judy's Jitterbug, mounted on a platform. For every $1,000 in bonds sold at the rally, a part of the plane would be painted. By the end of the day, the goal was shattered, and the plane was fully adorned, a tangible symbol of the crowd's collective will. The bond rallies were spectacular theater. In New York, a 24-hour bond blitz would take over Times Square. Movie screens showed specially produced short films where Humphrey Bogart, looking grimly determined, would tell audiences, "The only way to have that freedom is to fight for it. Buy bonds." Katharine Hepburn, in a rare public address, would speak with fierce intelligence about the cost of liberty. The stars didn't just talk, they performed. Bing Crosby crooned "White Christmas," and then immediately urged the crowd to dig deep. The Andrews sisters' boisterous harmonies were followed by a direct pitch for the Anzac and Yank bond. But the most effective tool was intimacy. The Treasury and the studios arranged for stars to go on tour, not to perform their hit shows, but to sell. They would appear at factory gates during shift changes. A worker leaving the graveyard shift at the Chrysler Tank Arsenal in Detroit, covered in grime and exhaustion, would be met by a smiling Betty Grable signing autographs. She wouldn't just sign. She'd look the worker in the eye and say, "My husband, bandleader Harry James, is flying in the Pacific. Your bond helps keep him safe. Will you help me?" The sale was guaranteed. It was peer pressure from a goddess. Cartoons joined the fight. Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Popeye starred in animated shorts where they battled Axis caricatures, with the triumphant finale always a call to buy bonds. Even Superman comic books had inserts where the Man of Steel would break the fourth wall, telling young readers, "You can be a Superman too. Buy war stamps and bonds." This omnipresent, star-studded campaign did two things with brilliant efficiency. First, it legitimized the financial ask. If glamorous, wealthy stars like Cary Grant or Rita Hayworth were passionately dedicating their time to selling bonds, how could the average citizen refuse? It made buying bonds the fashionable, patriotic thing to do. Second, it created a powerful, emotional feedback loop. The photo of a Marine kissing a nurse in Times Square on VJ Day is iconic, but equally potent for the home front was the photo of a starlet kissing a war worker who had just bought a $10,000 bond. It connected the sacrifice of the production line directly to the glamour of national purpose, making the mundane act of saving and buying a bond feel heroic, sexy, and essential. Hollywood had turned the war bond from a treasury security into a ticket to the greatest show on earth, the salvation of democracy. Part 3. The Engine of Democracy. The war bond machine was not powered by sentiment alone. Beneath the rallies and the movie star smiles lay a ruthless, efficient economic engine that penetrated every facet of American life. This was the institutional grind of the campaign, the mechanism that transformed spare change and payroll deductions into the steel bones of aircraft carriers. At the heart of this system was the payroll savings plan. In factories, offices, and government agencies, workers were encouraged, sometimes with significant social pressure, to automatically deduct 10% of their pay to purchase war bonds. For Walter Schmidt, a lathe operator at the Republic Aviation plant on Long Island, this wasn't an abstract choice. Every 2 weeks, he saw the line on his pay stub. Bond deduction, $12.50. That money vanished before he ever touched it, buying a bond that would mature years later. It was forced savings on a national scale, a brilliant tool to fight the inflation that inevitably dogs a wartime economy by sucking purchasing power out of circulation. Walter grumbled about it sometimes over a beer with his union buddies, but he also understood. The Thunderbolt fighters he helped build were paid for in part by that deduction. His sweat was building the airframe. His deferred wages were buying the engine and the guns. Corporations were not just facilitators. They were massive buyers themselves, using bonds as a way to park excess profits, which were now soaring due to war contracts, in a patriotic manner. A full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal wouldn't feature a product, but a simple declaration. General Motors is proud to invest $50,000 in the Fourth War Loan. Our tanks are your shield. Your bonds are our ammunition. It was corporate patriotism with a tangible balance sheet. The campaign's tendrils reached into the most private spaces. The Minuteman flag, a white banner with a red border and a blue star, or stars, in the center, hung in front windows, indicating a family member in service. Bond drive volunteers would canvass these neighborhoods, not as solicitors, but as fellow members of the home front army. Their pitch was unanswerable. Your boy is over there fighting. This bond is the bullet he'll fire next week. Refusal felt like betrayal. In apartment buildings, tenants competed to see which floor could raise the most money. Magazines like Life and the Saturday Evening Post ran relentless advertisements, featuring haunting images of determined soldiers with captions like, "He's giving his life. What are you giving? Buy war bonds." By 1945, the scale of the achievement was almost incomprehensible. Over 85 million Americans, more than half the population, had purchased war bonds. They had financed roughly 60% of the direct cost of the war, raising approximately $185 billion. Adjusted for today's economy, that's over $2.5 trillion, but the true impact was more than financial. The war bond campaign was the financial corollary of rationing. If rationing taught Americans to consume less for the common good, bonds taught them to invest in it. It democratized the war effort in a profound way. A tycoon on Wall Street might buy a $100,000 bond, but his chauffeur, through his payroll deduction, owned one too. Both could look at a fleet of B-17s and think, "I helped pay for that." It created a shared national equity in victory. For Walter Schmidt, the war ended with a chest full of bonds and a profound sense of dislocation. The relentless purpose of the assembly line was gone. But those bonds, maturing in the coming years, became the down payment on a small house in Levittown, the capital to start a tool and die shop, the college fund for his son. The money he had lent to his government to destroy fascism was returned to him to build the post-war American dream. The war bond was more than a financial instrument. It was a social contract. It asked for trust and sacrifice from the citizenry and promised victory and a return to prosperity in exchange. It transformed the abstract concept of war financing into a daily ritual of contribution, uniting Hollywood glamour, schoolyard competitions, factory payrolls, and kitchen table savings into a single mighty river of capital. It proved that a democracy could marshal its economic resources not by fiat, but by consent, persuasion, and a shared, unwavering belief in the cause. In the end, the bonds were not just how America paid for the war, they were how America felt the war, invested in it, and ultimately, how it secured the peace.